I hope that our lives, that my lifespan, your lifespan, everyone listening, isn't some bizarre, like, prelude to an idyllic future where we are forced to pay the costs, like those women that were making watches with fucking radium. And, you know, we just didn't know the side effects. We just didn't know them back then. And that all of us are going to live in this weird, mentally deranged, tribalistic, limbically hijacked world. And then we die. And then 2 generations from now, it's like,
that may just be the price we pay. My dad was born in a refugee camp during World War II in Switzerland of Jewish parents who fled from Poland in 1938 and lived. My grandmother lived her, the entire first 20 years of her life being hunted by Nazis and almost being sent to Auschwitz, and all of the rest of her family were wiped out. And at that moment, it was the stakes were high enough that reasonable people got their shit together and they built a fuck ton of bombs and a fuck ton of bombers, and they blew the Nazis out of the water. And decent societies like Australia and America and, the UK and Canada welcomed in people like my grandmother. I mean, my grandmother, when after the war, she went to the port in France where they were loading refugees onto boats to go to the New World, and the person who was signing people in to get on to allocate people to particular ships said, you can go to the United States or Canada or Australia. Which one do you want to go to? And she said, which one's furthest from here? Every generation puts up with its traumas in order to aid the eventual progress of human civilization. I'm an optimist about the long game. I think human resilience and ingenuity is strong enough that it will triumph. And in every era, sometimes there are just blessed generations. The boomers got lucky. They were born at a time where nothing really happened. They got to watch Seinfeld and watch Bill Clinton play the saxophone and then retire rich after the biggest property boom in the history of the world. I suspect that our fate, or maybe our children's fate, will be trickier. I mean, quite apart from anything, even if you're skeptical about climate chaos, it is a near certainty that the world is going to get a lot more chaotic, is going to get a lot more unpredictable. Storms are getting more intense. Droughts are getting more intense. Hurricanes are getting more intense. Bushfires are getting more intense. At the very least, even if you don't regard it as an existential threat, it's going to be a pain in the ass. It's going to be an enormously expensive pain in the ass. We're going to have to rebuild constantly. Your flights are constantly going to be delayed because of more thunderstorms. It's just going to be enormously expensive and annoying. And you add that stress to the stresses of the hijacking of the limbic system and to the stresses of society not knowing what's true and what's false, because anybody can generate an image of President Biden being assassinated and it's completely convincing and it can be disseminated online. When AI has the ability to move markets, which it already does by producing some bullshit, like if it can manufacture a convincing example of an airplane crashing and the AI itself can go short on airlines and then make a profit in the 30 seconds after it posts the airline crashing, then even if we can correct that in 90 seconds, the AI has still made a killing. Like, what are the incentives that we are blundering into? I can't see how it's not extremely stressful for us and our children to figure out what to do about all this. We need wise heads to prevail. We need to not get caught up in nonsensical culture war spats on social media. There are bigger games to play. I don't think that the thing we need to be worrying about is a Marxist woke takeover of universities, and I don't think that the thing we need to be worrying about is transgender activists grooming our children. Like both sides, the extremes of both sides are flying off the rails. They're in echo chambers of their own. They're victims, essentially, I think, to echo chambers. We need to remain even-keeled. I mean, and the last thing I would say about the challenge of this moment, which still relates to algorithms, is that it's not just that you've got an addictive supercomputer in your pocket which is tugging at your attention. It's also that you're being encouraged to curate your own life in real time. So it's like there's a constant sort of demon on your shoulder that is whispering in your ear to say, like, is this meal that you're having sufficiently pretty that you should be posting it on Instagram? Or is that thought that you just had sufficiently witty to post it to Twitter? So you're in the process of like kind of, there's this funny thing where like, and of course this predates social media. I mean, I was backpacking around India and we were in like Kashmir, sort of in the wilds of the Himalayas with a couple of mates of mine when we were in our 20s. And we climbed to the top of this mountain where there was a Buddhist temple to watch the monks prepare for the day. And I was sitting there on, outside this temple watching the sunrise and was struck by just how incredibly wild that situation was and how incredibly beautiful it was and how surreal it was. And my two friends are amateur photographers, and so they had their whiz-bang cameras, and they're scrambling all over the mountain, scrambling all over the temple, and they're getting the right photo. And after the sun's risen, we climb all the way back down, and they're comparing their cameras, and like, oh, look at this one. Oh, that's a great one. Oh, that's going to come up really great. And I'm standing there going, you missed it. You missed it. You missed the moment. You got the photo, and you didn't get what I got. Consciousness is like precious. This is a brief window of time that we're here. The corrosive impact of having these supercomputers in our pocket is not just that they're distracting our attention from living our lives, it's that the actual living of life becomes more difficult, becomes sometimes impossible if you're always thinking about whether it can be a piece of content. That's why I'm pretty clear about keeping my content, and my life, my life.